In this video, we're going to take a look at practice quiz number 6 on trig part 2. Number 1 says solve for x using law of cosines. So I see that I have an angle of 42 degrees and I'm looking for the side across from it. So I want to set up the law of cosines with the side squared. So x squared will equal, and then I need to use the other two sides that I have first. So I'm going to say, it doesn't matter which order you start with. So I'm going to say 22 squared plus 17 squared minus 2 times 22 times 17 cosine of the angle that was across from the side that I'm looking for. So that's 42 degrees. And then I noticed that I can type all of that in the calculator that's over here on the right, and then I'll almost be done solving. So let me bring up my calculator. All right, so I have 22 squared plus 17 squared minus 2 times 22 times 17, and then I need cosine of the angle, which is 42, and I need to make sure that's in degrees. Okay, and so I get x squared is now equal to 217, let's say 0.128. I'm just going to round it off. And then I need to take the square root of that. So the square root of 217.128 is approximately 14.7, because I had to take the square root to get rid of the square. So x equals 14.7. Okay. Number 2 says Jordan and Sandra are standing 10 meters apart. Both can see a bird flying in the sky. The angle of elevation from Jordan to the bird is 34 degrees, and the angle of elevation from Sandra to the bird is 46 degrees. How far is the bird from Jordan? So let's draw the scenario of there's a bird in the sky, and we have Jordan and Sandra standing on the ground 10 meters apart. And the angle of elevation from Jordan to the bird is 34 degrees, and the angle of elevation from Sandra to the bird is 46 degrees. How far is the bird from Jordan? So the bird from Jordan would be x over here. So what I can do is check and see if I can use the law of sines, because I have this angle of 46 degrees across from the side that I'm looking for. And then I have the 10. I just need to know that angle, which I can find that angle by taking these two angles away from 180. So first I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to say 34 plus 46 gives me 80 degrees, and then a whole triangle adds up to 180. So 180 minus the 80 degrees I already have will leave me with 100 degrees for this angle. And now I have a side across an angle and another side across an angle, so I can use the law of sines to solve for this one. So I can say sine of 46 over x would equal sine of 100 over 10. And then I just need to cross multiply to finish solving for x. So then I would get 10 sine of 46 degrees equals x sine of 100 degrees. And then, let me scoot this over. I'm going to use my calculator to help with the math. So let me bring that up. Let's see. So I need to type in 10 sine of 46. And let's make sure it's in degree mode, which it is. So I get 7.193 for that number. Okay, and then that is equal to x times the sine of 100. So that's 0.985. So x times 0.985, and then to solve for x, I just need to divide out the 0.985 to get x by itself. So in your calculator, you can go grab that first number, so you don't actually round it off, which is always good, and divide by the second number, and I get pretty much 7.3 for the side, like the distance from Jordan to the bird. Okay. So let's look at number 3. We want to graph one period of the following function. F of x equals negative 4 sine of x. So negative 4 is the amplitude. The negative just means it's going to go down instead of up. And then sine always looks like an S. So this S is going to go down as the first step instead of up, because that would be a positive sign if it looked like this one. And this looks like a negative sign. So then I know what I'm aiming for. And then I got 1, 2, 3, 4 for my amplitude. So I'm going to put 4 and -4. And then I'm going to plot 5 key points. So it starts at 0, because sine always starts at 0. But then instead of going up 4, I'm going to go down 4 for the next key point. I'm going to come back to 0. I'm going to go up 4 and then back to 0 again. And then I just need to sketch my graph. So that is how you can figure it out by hand. Like, I know that I didn't have a midline other than 0 because it just was no vertical shift on the function. You can also type it in Desmos if you want. So let's look at it that way. So if I clear it out and I type in -4 sine of x, and let's change it to radians. I can see I have 0, 0. I have pi over 2 is at -4. I have pi is just back at 0. 3 pi over 2 is at 4. And 2 pi is at 0. So it gives you 5 nice key points that you can just plot on your graph. So number 4 says graph 1 period of the function g of x equals 2 cosine x. So cosine graphs look like a U. And this one's going to have an amplitude of 2. So let's make a little tick mark at 2 and at -2. And then cosine starts at like your amplitude value, unless there's a midline other than 0, which there's not in this case. So I'm going to start at 2 because it's positive. I'm going to go to 0, then to -2, back to 0, and then up to +2, and then just draw that U-shaped graph. And then if I want to look at it with Desmos, I can. So I can type 2 cosine of x, and then it'll show you the same thing that I just plotted by hand. All right, last but not least, we have number 5. Determine the following key features of the function h of x given below. H of x equals 3 sine 4x plus 2. The midline always goes with your vertical shift. So I know the midline is y equals 2. You have to put y equals because it's a line. You can't just put the 2. That would not be correct. Amplitude is your a value, but it's just always positive. So that's just the 3. Period is going to be the number in front of x. So you just pick that right out. That would be, or excuse me, that's the frequency. Then period comes from that number. Period is always 2 pi divided by the frequency, which is the b that we found just now. So 2 pi divided by the frequency, which is 4. We could just reduce that a little bit to be pi over 2. And then that would be it for that one. And then the maximum, you can always find that by taking the midline and add the amplitude. And then to find the minimum, you can take the midline and you can subtract the amplitude. So without graphing it, I can tell the midline was 2 and the amplitude is 3. So the midline is 2, the amplitude is 3. So 2 plus 3 gives me a maximum value of 5. And then 2 minus the amplitude of 3 would give me a minimum value of -1. And then I can certainly graph that in Desmos and check all of those values. But that is it for your practice quiz number 6.